Hello everyone, it's Sarah with Paint and Party. We are going to paint the wagon wheel today. I have done this a couple of different ways. I've done different like summer colors, and then I did this kind of a little bit more of a fall color, but you could do any color for the flowers. It just kind of makes it versatile that you can make it match any room or for any season. I'm going to show you guys what we're using as far as supplies. I've got a stencil that if you had any trouble downloading, let me know, but that's just going to help us trace that wagon wheel on there a little bit. I have some transfer paper. It's like the old school carbon paper that we'll use. If you don't have any, you could always like cut the circle out and just kind of use this as a guide. This is easy to find at any like craft store, or Amazon has it, all that good stuff. I've got my big paintbrush that we'll use for the background. Got a medium paintbrush, and then I've got a skinny paintbrush. I'm using kind of a mixture of brands today of paint. I've got this full cart, it's kind of turquoise, and they do change the names sometimes, so just pick a turquoise that you like. I've got burnt umber. This is apple barrel from Walmart. I've got another folk art. This is yellow light, but you could use any kind of bright colored yellow. Apple barrel Christmas green. It's a good dark green. I like the dark green. And then I've just got some white and some black. And I think that's it. I'm gonna put a little bit of black. This is just a Artist Loft. You can get those at Michael's for like $10. A lot of times I'll buy the black and the white in those because I use so much of it, especially when I was hosting paint parties. We would use a lot. So, okay, I'm gonna set this aside. And what we're gonna do the background first. And then we wanna let that dry a little, and then we'll do the stencil. All right, so we're gonna start with the background here. I've got my largest brush. I've got some white and some of this dark brown. We wanna make the background kind of multicolored. So we've got a little bit of brown, a little bit of white, and then we'll put a little bit of black in there. But you wanna make sure it's light enough that you can see your wagon wheel. Okay, so this dark brown paint, I'm gonna put a little bit of water on my brush. This dark brown paint doesn't take very much at all to darken up your white. And if you don't have that dark brown color, you can always add a teeny bit of black to your regular brown, and that will help you, that will make that like chocolatey brown color. Okay, so we're just putting the paint on the canvas. And I don't think I mentioned, this is an 11 by 14 canvas. It's the smaller one. Okay. And so the way we get that dimension and the different colors peeking through is we're just not mixing our paint all the way. Okay. And if you feel like you got yours too dark, you can always add some more white to it. If you keep going over it and it's still too dark, you may need to just rinse your paintbrush and let your paint dry a little bit, and then come back over it with some lighter color. Okay, so the goal is we want to just cover this whole entire background. We do want to get the sides as we're going. There we go. Blend that in on the top. Added a little bit more water to my paint. These edges here. Okay, get this bottom ledge. And one more over here. Okay. So once you get that kind of the way you want it to look, we will add a teeny bit of dark if you want to. So if you look at the top, there's some black that's just kind of shaded in up here, okay? So what we want to do, I'm gonna put a little bit more white on my plate. We don't want to go on there with like straight black at all. We just want to darken it a little. So I rinsed my big brush. I'm gonna dry it off a little bit. And what I want to do is I want to take teeny bit of black paint. Okay, I mean like there's barely any on there. And a little bit of this brown color. So really what we're doing is we're just making this brown darker. And we're just gonna flick our brush down and it's just gonna add that rustic, a little bit of darkness to the top. Okay, you could add some throughout the painting if you want, but again, we don't want to get too dark. Okay. Now, like I said earlier, if you feel like you get too dark or you just don't like the way it looks, let it dry. And then you can come back over it with some lighter color or even, you know, go over the whole thing. I think that dark colors sometimes are really hard to blend, but I like the effect. So we got to try it out sometimes. All right, next step is going to be to draw on our wagon wheel. So we want to make sure this background is really good and dry. So I'm going to get out my hairdryer. I'm going to dry it a little bit, and then we will get out our stencils and we'll do the outline, and then we'll move on to our wagon wheel. Okay. So the way we use this tracing paper, carbon paper, whatever you want to call it, you can use it as many times as you want. You can see I've used it a lot, but the shiny side, the black side goes down. And this one is an 8.5 by 11 sheet. They come in all sizes, but I like this one because it fits the size of the stencils that I try to do. So I try to do all the stencils and templates the 8.5 by 11. So they fit on these 11 by 14 canvases and they print easily. So if you had any issues printing, like I said earlier, please let me know. Okay, so then we're just gonna sit this right down at the bottom. Now, the goal of these lines is not really to, you know, you're not making your outline that you're gonna see at the end. It's just a guide, okay? So we're just gonna use an ink pen, and you don't wanna push too hard because you don't wanna bust through your canvas. It doesn't take a lot. And we're just going to follow along these lines. Now, like I said, it's just gonna be a guide, right? So they don't have to be perfect. And this top part is missing, so I'm just gonna make my line go all the way across. And this is a rustic old wagon wheel, right? So these are old pieces of wood that are probably jagged and not in the perfect shape. So I like that because that means our lines don't have to be straight and all that fun stuff. Okay, so I'm just going across these lines to this bottom. Sometimes it's hard to tell where you've been and where you haven't been. I think so anyway. Okay, so we got that one. Now I'll do this bottom one. And I don't think I did this bottom, but it's okay if I end up with 2 lines. Okay. The big reveal. All right, so it's messy, it's not beautiful, but it serves the purpose, right? Okay, so I wanna get my paint back out. I'm gonna use this medium-sized brush to fill in my wagon wheel. I'm also gonna use this skinny brush. You can use your big brush if you want to, but I think that this gives us a little bit more control, okay? So we're gonna use brown, white, and black. And I did a lot of shading on this wheel, so I'm gonna just kind of show you guys as I go how I did that shading while the paint's wet. And then you guys can kind of play with the shading as well and see, you know, where you can add it where you think you want it. Okay, so for example, let's see, I have straight brown on my brush, and I'm not being stingy with the paint. I've got quite a bit of paint on my brush, and I've still got my brown on there, and I'm just gonna barely dip it in some white and just blend that in. So it's just shading it. So if I'm just doing this for demonstration, but if you just keep going over that, like we tend to do, you're just gonna get a light brown. And that's not what we want. We want to put some white on, do a little shading, and then let it go. Okay? And you can do the shading wherever you want, with white or with black. And unless you have a ton of white on your brush, you really don't need to go back in and rinse it every time. The only time I would say rinse it is if you get too much black in there. And I'm just slowly going around. I'm covering up my lines that I made for my carbon paper. Okay, and then I'm gonna go back again. I'm gonna add a little bit of shading. And remember, we're gonna have flowers on top of here. So that's gonna add to it. We'll also do a little bit of outlining once we get the whole wagon wheel done. And you can also do a teeny bit of black shading if you want. I wouldn't do too much, but a little bit will give it that curved look. Okay, and then this is kind of one of those things where it's like, okay, stop when you like it, because the next brush stroke you may not like. So once you have it the way you like it, just let it be. All right. Got a little too much paint on there, so I'm gonna just use some on the next one. And any of these lines that you're like, I think that needs to be a little thicker, or you know, whatever, you can always thicken up. It's much easier to make something a bit larger than it is to make it smaller. And some shading here. Woo! A little much. So I just wiped my brush off. Just gonna go in and soften this. Okay. So we just want to fill all these little guys in. I'm going to add the shading on them. And this bottom part's going to be brown too, so you don't have to be super particular about getting your paint in there. And I know, again, I paint faster than you guys. I always tried to hurry at paint parties because I wanted to get out there to help everyone. And so, plus I doubt you want to watch like a 3-hour video. So again, just pause me. And fill in this bottom. Okay. I'm gonna do this side over here. I just feel like it might be a little easier for me if I turn my canvas. So I'm gonna just fill these little guys in. And then we will, we'll do a little bit of outlining on this wagon wheel. That is just another like kind of technique to give it that curved look and to make it look more real. I always tell people you don't have to outline if you don't want to. Some people just like really stress out about it. You could, there's a couple of other options. You can use a Sharpie or a paint pen. If you use a Sharpie especially, you need to make sure that it gets completely dry because you'll ruin your marker. You don't want to do that. Okay, add a little bit more shading in here. Add a little bit of black down here. Okay. All right, so my rustic wagon wheel. All right, so I did not add outline everywhere, but I did use black, and we're gonna use that skinny mini little brush. You don't have to wait until everything is dry. It's okay if these colors kind of blend together. If you have some edges that are like a little wonky, that's always a great place to outline, just to kind of clean things up. But I'm just picking some spots and giving it a little outline. And do a little bit down here and a little inside. Barely pushing on the brush. You can see, I think it just gives it that extra step. Just to give it a little bit more detail. You can always add more too after you do the flowers. If you're like, oh, that needs something, you can always add a little bit more outlines or shading. All right, I think I'm gonna do a little outline down here with some brown just to kind of clean that line up. Okay. And if you want to do any more shading, now's the time to do it, because once we get those flowers on there, you're not going to be able to make those long, smoother lines. Okay, so you want to get all your shading and all your everything done, except for, you know, if you want to do a little bit of outlining, you want to get all that done before we do the flowers. And we want to make sure that wherever we're putting the flowers on, it's good and dry. So I'm gonna get out my hairdryer one more time here and just get, make sure this is really dry, because we don't want black to get in our yellow or our turquoise. So we're gonna use the skinny brush, and then you might wanna use your medium-sized brush some. If you have one, like if you bought the package of different brushes that's kind of in between, you can use that too. If you don't, you can still make a great flower without. I would encourage you guys to just kind of practice. If you haven't done these kind of flowers before, just kind of practice on a piece of paper, or oh, my paint is dry, or on, like, if you're using a big piece of paper like I am. But it's kind of like 4 leaves. So I make a circle, and this is not, this first round is not ever perfect, right? So, and then always go a little smaller than you think you need to be. And I'm using that skinny brush, light touch, and I'm doing kind of like a teardrop, pointy end. Okay, so you can always fatten these up, so do a little skinnier than you think they need to be. And then when you go to paint them and fill them in, you can make it a little fatter. Okay. And then we'll add some little leaves in too to kind of fill in the gaps, okay? I'm gonna put a little bit more paint on my plate. Mine is dry from, I think, from the hairdryer. Okay. All right, so make sure you start somewhere where your paint is good and dry. I'm gonna start up here with this one. So this is kind of like when I do a tree or anything else. Put the flowers wherever you want. You don't have to do them exactly where mine are. If you want more flowers or larger flowers, that's completely okay. And mine will look different as well. That's just part of the fun. All right, so first flower. I'm gonna make my circle about the size of a dime. Okay. Just using that turquoise paint. That's it, no water. Now remember, do these petals a little skinnier than you think they need to be. And if you happen to run into some black paint that isn't dry that you thought was, the best thing, if it, you know, if it gets your paint all dark, the best thing to do is just rinse your brush and let that completely dry, and then you should be able to cover it up, no problem. Okay. All right, so we're just doing 4 petals. Okay. So if you look at this one, I can definitely see that this one needs to be bigger when I fill it in, which is no problem. So I'm gonna use this medium brush. You may wanna stick with your skinny brush. I always say brushes are a preference, so try them both out and see what you think. And don't be afraid of the paint. Okay, now, so I'm just gonna fatten this up by just going outside of my line a little bit. Okay. And this is how we're gonna make all of these. So they're all gonna be the same shape, the same type of flower. The only difference is gonna be the yellow. We're gonna add white in on the first coat because yellow is a little see-through. And really this turquoise shouldn't need more than 1 coat. Typically turquoise covers really well, but you can certainly go back in with a second coat if you want to. Okay. So I'm gonna do all the turquoise ones because I have that on my brush. And then we're going to come back and do some yellow. All right, so I've got another turquoise down here. And we'll do the leaves. We're just gonna do the flower part first. Okay. Another little circle. Look at our petals. Thought about doing some stencils for the flowers. And then I thought, no, you guys can do it. You can do it. The nice thing is you can practice as much as you want on like a piece of paper or something. All right, so with this little flower, I'm just using my skinny brush. I'm not using that medium brush. I think it's just too big to fill it in with. So I'm just loading this little brush up with a lot of paint. Light touch. Okay. All right, now I've got one more turquoise one, and I did it on this third one in, if you're following me. I painted this painting with about 50 women for a local hospital. It was like a fundraiser. And it was a little different. It was different colors, but it was so fun to see how everybody's looked so cool and so different. Everybody mixed their colors differently. Everybody put their flowers in different spots. That is so fun when you see a bunch of people painting. That's why I always say, I want to see your painting, because it's so neat to see the different perspective that everyone puts in the different things that everyone does with their paintings. Okay. All right, so I'm gonna rinse these out and we're gonna switch to yellow. We're just gonna let that dry. And then we'll come back to it and add the centers and all the fun little parts to it. All right, so I said a little bit ago with the yellow, we're gonna use some white. So make sure it's clean white. We're just gonna take some yellow and some white and just mix it together. If you notice, I didn't go like put some white in and mix the whole thing. We're just gonna use part of it because we wanna have some bright yellow to put on top of our light yellow, okay? And it doesn't take a lot. So I'm gonna start with this one down here. And this first coat with the yellow isn't always perfect. It looks like a bird. It's got, you know, sometimes you'll be able to see through it. But that's why we're doing 2 coats. So we'll do this first one and then we'll let it dry. And if your yellow is a little lighter than mine, it's okay. That second coat will really kind of make it pop. Okay. All right, so I'm gonna do another one here, kind of on that second spoke or whatever they call. All right. This one a little bigger. And I got these a little close together. I'm just gonna go with it and just make this one cover up the turquoise one a little bit. And then add a little bit more white in. Okay. All right, and then we're gonna do one more up here. Excuse me, in the yellow. Okay. I always think these flowers look a little weird until we get the centers in. So if you feel like yours are looking like kind of like blobs, it's okay. The centers help and the leaves will help. Okay. So I'm gonna rinse that skinny brush. And now if any of you feel like you need a second coat on your turquoise flowers, now's the time to do that. And you may not need a complete second coat, but just like go in and cover up any spots where you can see the brown underneath. Maybe just partially. And it's okay to make this paint thick on the flowers. I think that helps make them look a little bit more real and lifelike. Okay. All right, I'm feeling good about those. We're still gonna let the yellow ones dry a little. All right, we're gonna do some green. So I've painted these kind of flowers with like thousands of people over the last years, over the last decade. And I know that sometimes the petals will get really big and they'll come together. So if you don't feel like you have room for these leaves or you don't want to add them, that's okay. Or you could always add them out a little further. But it's really just the same shape. We're just using green paint, but a little smaller. So we're just adding some green. And I did just one on each flower. And so you can pick which one you think it needs to go in. So I did the green, so now I'm gonna add a little bit of white. It's just gonna shade it up there a little bit. Okay. And then this one, I think that this little edge right here is just a little weird, so we'll do a do a leaf there. And I'm gonna do one on the inside here. And I've just still got a little bit of white and a little bit of green on my brush. Okay. All right, and then this one, I think I'll kind of make it where it's like peeking behind there. Now, if you have one that where like maybe you got your leaf too big, or you know, you can always go in and make those petals a little larger. It's kind of a good trick to, you know, offset if you make something that's too big. Same with if you have one petal that is like too small, just make it a little larger, or if you have one that is too big, you can go in and make the others a little bigger. Hopefully that makes sense, but just kind of helps to make those all the same size. All right. So next up is our yellow. Probably needs a little bit more bright yellow paint. So I rinsed my skinny brush. Again, take your time. If you need to pause me, please do. All right, so I've got straight yellow. And I'm just gonna come in and just brighten this up a little bit. If it's still struggling to cover, we need to add a little bit more white. And basically what you'll do is you'll end up doing 3 coats if you want it to be this bright color. So you'll do the second coat, let it dry, and then come back in with some bright yellow. But that's only if you're struggling to cover. So if you can see like that dark brown through. Okay. And just be careful if your green is still wet, not to drag that through your yellow. I'm just gonna let that one come right on top of that turquoise. Like that. I got some green in there. So I'm just gonna wipe my brush off. The good thing is the green will complement the yellow. You may even like the way it looks. Okay. And I'm just using the skinny brush for the second coat. You could use a different brush. I just like to kind of glob a lot of paint on there and just pull it through. Careful around the grain. Okay. I love that bright yellow with that second coat. Okay. So we want to rinse our brush. And you want to make sure your flowers are done, except for the, like the little black marks that we're going to put in there before we put the centers in. Okay, so you don't want to like have to come back and do a third coat with the center in. You want to do the center after you've got all of your coats on and all your leaves on. Okay, so the way we're going to do these centers is skinny brush, a big glob of white paint. I would start with the turquoise ones because they're probably more dry. And I'm dabbing this paint on. To make it thick. Okay. Same with this one. And my leaf kind of comes in towards the center. I'm just gonna go right on top of it. Okay. I'll show you guys that up close. Okay. And the centers will all be different sizes depending on how big your flower is. So just like everything else that I say, go a little smaller. You can always make it bigger. All right, do this yellow one down here. My yellow is still a little bit wet, but I'm okay with that. If a little bit of yellow mixes in with my white, I think it will be just fine. Got a good amount of paint on there. Hopefully you guys can see that. All right. You can always add more of that white on there if it dries and it looks really flat and dull. You can always add some more on. You can add as much as you want. Okay, so this last step, whenever you're ready, is just these kind of black lines that I put in the petals of the flowers. Okay, you could do white, you could do yellow on the turquoise, and you know, if you didn't want to do black. But I'm going to show you guys. You want your skinniest brush. Okay, you want it to be as pointy as it can be, and you just need a teensy bit of black paint. Okay, and you want to find one of these that is dry, and I'm just going in super light touch, like such a light touch that it's almost not even. Okay, and I'm making 3 lines. So this is doing a couple of things. One, we're kind of defining our petals. So if you have petals that run together and they look like a blob, these will help to define where your petals are, okay? But they also make those little lines like on a flower with, you know, from the center. Super light touch. And you could always try like the white out on the yellow, or make one on a piece of paper and test, you know, other colors. But I'm just moving on here. And the only reason why I say that is because after painting with people for so long, I know that black paint can be intimidating because it's hard to cover. You know, it's like, oh, you can ruin a painting with some black paint. All right, so this is a good example here where my petals kind of went together. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna just take this super light line And I just sort of outlined those petals. So it just helps to define where they are. Okay, I think my yellow is pretty good and dry. If you get too much black, you can cover it up. But like I said earlier, let it completely dry, like completely. And then you can go over it with a little bit of white, or you could even just soften it with some of the color of your flower. You can see they're all kind of a little different. And then if you feel like you need to go back and like add any, you know, any like shading on the corners here just to kind of define your wagon wheel, you can. Now that everything's all good and dry. But I think it looks pretty good. So of course, let me know if you guys have any questions. I would love to see your finished product. So shoot me over a picture. Let me know how it goes. And I hope to paint with all of you guys again really soon. I'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.